Although a handful of earlier champions had achieved a degree of recognition for women's tennis during its so-called golden age, Frenchwoman Suzanne Lenglen was without doubt the first global superstar of the women's game. She dominated her rivals between 1919 and 1926, in the process becoming the first female player, in the style of Serena Williams today, to transcend the sport and achieve international celebrity. Suzanne was born into an upper-middle-class family in Paris in 1899. A sickly child, she was encouraged to take up tennis by her father in the hope that exercise and fresh air would improve her asthma. She proved a child prodigy, and at the age of just 14, she reached the final of the 1914 French Championships. The First World War put her tennis career on hold, but when competition resumed, Suzanne set about forging a dominance over her sport unmatched in its history. At her first Wimbledon in 1919, she defeated seven-time champion Great Britain's Dorothea Lambert-Chambers 9-7 in the final set, saving 2 match points along the way. Thereafter, she was barely troubled, even by her closest rivals. Suzanne won all 6 Wimbledon championships at which she competed between 1919 and 1925. She won the French championships, now the French Open, every year from 1920 to 1926, and the World Hardcourt Championships from 1920 to 1923. In her entire career, she won 341 matches and lost just 7. Her only post-war loss came when she was forced to forfeit a match due to whooping cough against the Norwegian-born American star Molla Bjørstedt-Mallory. Booed off the court and accused by the American press of having forfeited the match to avoid defeat, Suzanne made it her mission to illustrate her unequivocal superiority over Mallory, defeating the 8-time US champion 6-2, 6-love in only 26 minutes in the 1922 Wimbledon final, before beating her again without the loss of a single game at a tournament at Nice later that year. Undoubtedly, though, the greatest match of Suzanne's career was one of her last. In February 1926, in a famous encounter at Caen, she defeated the rising American teenager Helen Wills, a future 8-time Wimbledon champion who would succeed Suzanne as the game's greatest player, 6-3, 8-6, with contemporary observers almost uniformly claiming the contest to have been the highest caliber women's match ever played. Suzanne's on-court mastery, however, would prove but a single thread in her vital contribution to the growth of the women's game. It was she who recognisably transformed women's tennis from a relatively staid affair in which competitors, weighed down by heavy Edwardian ankle-length dresses, manoeuvred each other around the court in stately fashion, into our modern athletic conception of international tennis, in which female players sprint, swivel, lunge, and work up a serious sweat. Suzanne scandalised both press and public at her first Wimbledon appearance in 1919 by wearing a fluttery knee-length skirt that entirely exposed her lower legs. She became the first female player to compete in short sleeves and was given to sipping brandy at change of ends. She also became the first female player to openly display her frustrations on court, swatting her racket angrily, slapping her thigh in exasperation, and sometimes even being moved to tears when the run of play went against her. Suzanne was in every sense a flamboyant trendsetter, a global media darling, and the biggest female sports star in the world, feted wherever she went and nicknamed La Divine, the goddess, by the French press. Suzanne's standing as a true pioneer of her sport would achieve its ultimate expression, however, upon her retirement from amateur tennis in 1926. Alongside American veteran Mary Brown, she became the first female player to turn professional. In order to play at the Grand Slams, one had to maintain one's amateur status, meaning it was illegal to play for prize money or a retaining fee. Suzanne's series of 38 matches against Brown in 1926 stands as the first and only professional tour in which a pair of female players were the headline act, with Suzanne receiving for her participation the extravagant sum of $50,000, over $700,000 in today's currency. Her decision to turn pro, however, proved far from popular amongst tennis traditionalists, and Suzanne faced heavy criticism in the press and from the sport's various governing bodies. The All England Club at Wimbledon even spitefully revoked her life membership. Suzanne, though, remained typically defiant, perceptively articulating the need for tennis to move towards professionalism decades before such arguments came into vogue, observing, "In the 12 years I have been champion, I have not earned $5,000. I am 27 and not wealthy. Under these absurd and antiquated amateur rulings, only a wealthy person can compete, and the fact of the matter is that only wealthy people do compete. Is that fair? Does it advance the sport? Does it make tennis more popular? Or does it tend to suppress and hinder an enormous amount of tennis talent lying dormant in the bodies of young men and women whose names are not in the social register?" As if to punctuate her professional talents, Suzanne proceeded to win all 38 of her matches against Brown, reinforcing her standing as the greatest player the game had yet produced. Sadly, the gruelling nature of the professional circuit, travelling from one town to the next, playing almost daily with little rest, ultimately took its toll upon Suzanne's fragile health. She retired from competition in February 1927 and made her last great contribution to international tennis by opening up her own tennis academy in Paris, which, by 1936, had developed into the training centre for the French Tennis Federation. Suzanne, though, would not live to witness its long-term growth. She was diagnosed with leukemia in June 1938 and died of pernicious anemia the following month. 4 decades later, she was posthumously inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. In 1997, the second court at Roland-Garros, the site of the French Open, was renamed Court Suzanne Lenglen in her honour, whilst today's female players enter the tournament striving to win the Suzanne Lenglen Cup. If you enjoyed this content, I'd recommend checking out my new book, Hollywood's Women of Action, From the Perils of Pauline to Wonder Woman, which examines the development of the action heroine as a character from the silent screen era to the present day. It's available from Amazon and other international booksellers. To purchase, follow the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.